All right, we're on. Thank you, Anne, for acknowledging the need to speak about this topic and to speak it with me and my audience. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. And thanks so much for having me here, Ricardo, so that we can talk a little bit about this often misunderstood topic of grief and loss and how it impacts us, and especially with today's climate.
Yes, indeed. Um, Tell me a little bit about how you would describe grief.
This is a really good question because a lot of people think they know the answer to it. And most people think about grief as dealing with death and divorce. Those are the two biggies that come up. And of course it is. But if we break it down, it's actually all of those conflicting emotions that we have anytime we have a loss that's significant to us. And notice I use the word significant. So if we lose something or it's taken away or it leaves us and it's significant, then we will have a difficult time usually with conflicting emotions that come up. So, for example, let's say we have someone who died after a battle of cancer. And as we know, there's usually a lot of physical pain, emotional pain that goes with that. So, okay, they died. I'm sad, but I'm happy because they're not in pain anymore. But I'm still sad and I miss them. Yes, but I shouldn't feel that way. You get the idea. It can be a little bit of a hamster wheel and it can go around and we can have roller coaster emotions. Some people feel nothing. Some people feel a whole myriad of different emotions. Just depends on what the loss was and how significant it is to them. And that's why it's really important when we're trying to help others through it that we understand that we really don't know what they're feeling or what that loss meant to them.
So when people say things like, you know, they're no longer suffering, or, you know, at least you have another dog, or, um, you'll get through this. What should we, as compassionate beings, and how should we interact with people? I mean, should we
That's
just say nothing?
no, that's a really, really good question because most of what we say are the things that we've been taught, and I'm going to make a pretty shocking statement. Most of those things are not helpful. And even though oftentimes the words are coming out of our mouths and we hear ourselves saying them, we know that they're really not going to help, but it's all we know, right? We have this little tool bag of skills in our lives and we open it up. It's like, okay, what have I got in here to deal with grief? Well, I've heard people say this, I've seen people do this. So you pull it out, all the old cliches like not suffering anymore. Well, they lived a long life, or like you said, at least you have another dog. A lot of these things are what we call the myths of grief, because a lot of people simply do not know how to speak to someone and to help support them. And the most important thing is that we don't try and fix them. And these things are often said as a way to take away someone's pain. It's the most natural thing in the world that we would want to take someone's pain away when they're grieving. But if we're saying the things that don't help or actually end up hurting that people, it can push them further and further into isolation and into their grief. And that's really one of the worst things that can happen, because then they begin to believe there's something wrong with them, especially if we tell them not to feel bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because why would you not feel bad? Your heart is probably broken. Or if you're being told to be strong for others, you've got to buck up and be there for everybody else. It's just so very, very difficult for them to know how they should or shouldn't be. They don't realize that it's normal and natural for them to feel this way. And then we're telling them to feel another way. So very, very difficult to know what to say. And the best thing you can say is, if you don't know, I'm sorry, I really don't know what to say. And some people don't feel comfortable saying that because they feel they should know. But that's really one of the best things you can say, or a simple, heartfelt sorry.
Yeah, I do feel it's a little bit of a conundrum, because, as somebody who's experienced grief, personally, there's that space where, you're feeling something heartfelt, But at the same time, how do you say something that's heartfelt but also supportive?
Right, right. And
Because
sincere.
it's sincere, right? Which is, I think, why we sometimes, you know, sideline to these ways of expressing ourselves, making certain comments. So how do we navigate, like diving into the very heart of the matter, pun intended, to acknowledge, to stay present to the pain, the grief, but also say something that is also congruent, helpful, and not just trying to throw whipped cream on dung.
Right, right. And you know, again, you bring up a good point there, because if we look at it this way, so we've got the person who's grieving over here, we've got the people over here who are trying to support them through their grief, but in the middle we've got this big chasm, this big channel, and all these words and all these feelings are coming in here, and they're not kind of making it over to the other side. So the people who are trying to support, maybe their efforts aren't getting through the person who's grieving. Maybe their message isn't getting back over that big old divide. So we have a lot of miscommunication. We have a lot of just giving up. It's like, well, I don't know what to do. And at a certain point, as I know you are aware, you're expected to just get on and be normal again, and nothing has really happened. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety that's caused by this. But the most important thing is that the ones who are trying to support the person who are grieving, they're not trying to fix the person who's grieving. They don't need to be fixed. They don't need to be told, oh, let's go and do some shopping. Let's go to the movies, or, you'll have another husband in 3 years, or you'll start dating again in 3. They don't need that. They need to talk about how they feel. And that's the rub, because some people don't feel comfortable talking to others about how they feel. And that's really, really difficult, because half them can't even express their emotions to themselves. So grief is a very, very easy thing for people to shut down, and for so many reasons. And the more we try and push these ideas on them that there's something wrong with them, or they should feel a certain way, it just pushes them further away from getting help.
And that's why I like the Grief Handbook program, because they actually work on both sides of the aisle. They help the person who's experiencing grief, focus on fundamentals of, what it means to be dealing with grief and feeling it. But it also helps the person who is the friend, the relative, the neighbor, the person witnessing the person in grief.
Yeah.
And I think both sides are equally needing this information and would benefit from, learning more about this information, because there really is a divide, and it's a divide of comfortableness, of emotions on both sides. It's a divide of having the right conversation, vocabulary of how to talk about our emotions, how to respect, how to draw out the emotions from the other person, but also acknowledge from your side without, planting a seed of something, a distraction, or without trying to take away. And so that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on, is because, more people, I think, would benefit to know that there's more options out there than what we've been taught.
Yes, and thank you. I've been doing this for over 15 years now, and as you know, it's not therapy, it's actually action steps. And by the time people get to me, they've been through an incredible amount of different ways of kind people trying to help them, or, sending them to different things, different people. But by the time they get to me, usually they're ready for something, they're ready to put their teeth into it. And as you know, they are action-based steps that get you through in a relatively short amount of time. But yes, it can be extremely disconcerting, because the most important thing to understand about grief, it's inconvenient. It's extremely inconvenient. You have someone who maybe just got devastating news. Your first thing is your heart goes out to them. You want to help them feel better. You want to take away the pain, right? Most natural thing in the world. So that's where you look in that bag of tricks and it's like, oh, okay, well, this is the things to say, right? So I'll say those things, and then in a certain amount of time, because time heals all wounds, right? Certain amount of time, everything should be done, right? Yeah, no, time doesn't heal all wounds, and no, everything's not going to be done on your timetable, because grief will take most people out of their comfort zone in a very, very difficult way. It'll make them realize that, first of all, they're not really sure what to say, and what they're saying isn't working. Well, what do I do now? I don't know. So, then we start changing the subject, and then we start leaving that person behind, and they have to kind of catch up, or they go around doing what most of them do, saying, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm back. You don't have to walk on eggshells around me anymore. So that's the main thing to realize here, that grief is so, so very inconvenient for everybody, because it has a huge ripple effect. It's not just the person who's grieving, it's all of those people around them that are in relationship with the person or the persons. If it's a family, it could be a family that's grieving. And then to understand that each family member is going to be grieving in their own way, because every relationship is unique, no exceptions.
Yeah, that is very true. No exceptions at all.
None whatsoever.
And I know that some of these steps in the program are proprietary, so we're not going to discuss them here in detail. But what kind of mental framework, would you kind of structure for people who may be asking, where does this type of training, education go? Like, where does it lead? How does the individual begin to assimilate this process?
Love that question. So basically, simple answer, getting you from your head to your heart. This is heart-based work. And that's why some people are like, I don't want to go into my heart. Well, here's the deal. You can intellectualize your grief all day long. And just look at Amazon. There are, I don't want to say millions, but I'm sure it's getting pretty close. There are hundreds of thousands of books out there about grief, and people telling and explaining their grief and different ways of working at it. And indeed, there's more than one way to perhaps approach this. But the way that I approach it, and the reason I've been doing this for so long and will continue to do it, because it makes sense, and it's structured, and it's easy on an intellectual basis, but it's challenging on the heart, because you have to get into your heart to do this work, because you have to be able to bring those feelings out. Again, it's not therapy. And why I love doing this work is you can break it down each week. There's a different amount of work that needs to be done. But what I would encourage anybody here right now listening to this who is dealing with grief and pain and really not being heard, because that's one of the biggest things with someone who's grieving. They're not being heard. They're being told all of these things and just ends up shutting them down. One of the fastest ways that you can get a sense of relief is to get out a piece of paper and write down your feeling words. I'm not kidding. It sounds extremely easy, but it's very effective. And not writing down how you feel, not in a big long paragraph or anything like that, but single words. That's the key, and it's very powerful. So it could be angry, it could be betrayed, it could be misunderstood, it could be confused. You don't have to make sense, you don't have to edit it. This is for you to get clear on how you feel. And you would be amazed. I watch people when they do this and they look up and say, wow, I didn't realize I was feeling so much. No wonder I'm so confused. So that's always my first thing for anybody, to just write down your list of feeling words. That helps you to get very clear, and it actually helps to lighten the load somewhat. It's not going to fix everything, but it's certainly the first step. It's the first step I do with all of my people.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Just acknowledging the obvious and the not so obvious. And
Yes.
as fundamental way as you can. I think it's safe to say that, you know, any activity is better than no activity. Doing something's better than nothing, right? Because grief doesn't just disappear, you know, right?
No, 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 it
It
does
won't
not.
go away just because you air out the room.
No, not because you want it. And, you know, I've worked with people into their 90s, and I've had them sit there and to describe in detail the moment when their heart was broken. They can even remember the clothes that people were wearing. You know, I mean, my point is that you think that time heals wounds, right? Please understand, time does not heal wounds. It simply dulls the edges of that sharp pain of grief. It allows us to create coping mechanisms which may or may not be healthy or helpful, but it will dull the pain, and it will actually obviously lengthen the event, right? So it's normal and natural that we will feel a little bit better over time, but it does not take it away. It does not take it away, because I can assure you, as I said, even people into their 90s can describe in detail what happened, how, and most importantly, how they felt. That feeling does not go away. That's what we're dealing with here. And when they realize, it's like, wow, I can actually do what I need to around that, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I know from personal experience, I've had experiences of thinking that things were settled. I had dealt with it, you know,
Yeah.
and then something, you know, a Mack truck hits you.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
like wondering what the heck happened.
Exactly, exactly, yeah.
But
And
this program is really helpful in slowing things down, so you don't have to, you know, chew a bunch of ideas, or it feels natural because it's heart centered.
yeah, exactly. And it's not rocket science. And it's like I tell people, the work is actually very simple. Very, very simple. I still get excited after doing it all these years with the tools that we use, but it's not easy because you do have to go to your heart. So I spend a good amount of time with people, talking with them before we even sign on to do the work, because they need to make a commitment to do this. And what I want to make very clear here, you know, we really have to embrace the fact when it comes to grief, we have to do the work. There's no magic wand. I mean, I wish I had one. It would be wonderful, but there are no magic pills. And, you know, we have to take action steps. That's the thing. We actually have to do something to move forward. So the most important thing to remember, there really is hope here, and it's never too late to heal the hurt and release the pain. It's just not. It doesn't matter how long you've been carrying it around for. You can do something with it.
In dealing with our current reality of our life, our
Mm-hmm.
global community, how can we bring that in and use that as a lens to, you know, kind of bring that home for right now?
Right, right. And that is a very good question. And I would imagine you're talking about the geopolitical strife that we're facing globally. And
Yes.
it's you know, I think every generation thinks theirs is it's really bad. Well, you know, it is becoming exponentially worse. And I think what people need to realize here, there's a loss of safety. Certainly, you know, we have all of these atrocities happening, but most importantly, if we understand there's a loss of safety. And when it comes to that, that rattles us to our very core, because one of our fundamental genetic encoding in our primal brain is to be safe. That's one of our most basic needs. And so that's being challenged on many levels: physical, emotional, spiritual, religious, whatever you want, whichever way you want to look at it, but it is being challenged. So one of the things that I would recommend for people is to just be real. Just be real. We can go around all day saying it'll be okay. And my hopes and thoughts, absolutely, I sure hope it's going to be okay. But it's really not a good idea to try and suppress those feelings of being unsafe, especially when we have a family or we have children or younger ones who may not understand what all of this means and are feeling most definitely a change in the tension of people around them, just to let them know, we're doing the best we can for us to be safe and not try and be strong. We often tend to put on that Superman or the Superwoman outfit or whatever gender we might want to use there to show people, I got this. Well, yeah, you might have it, but that only goes so far. But it's a time to be real. It's a time to say, well, I don't know what the future holds, but we collectively, if you're a caretaker for a family or the adults, we're doing the best we can to keep us and you safe, and to let children specifically see you have emotions instead of trying to bottle it up, because most kids know by a certain age that mom or dad is not Superman or Superwoman. And if you're constantly trying to be this big tough thing, they're just basically waiting for it to all fall apart. But if you're real and honest, it's like, well, I'm scared too, or whatever words you need, but be real with your kids, be real with each other, and write down those feeling words. That's really the best way to start to navigate this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that idea of being, straightforward and honest with kids.
Yeah.
I know that some people like to, keep certain adult decisions and dramas away from kids. And I think that, sure, everybody has to find their comfort zone. But, I think kids are intuitive enough to know, like, when daddy or mommy's is acting a little off.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I think that begins to build a divide, when you try to portray, oh, everything's going to be fine, don't worry about it, just go play, and they sense that. They intuitively, our bodies are wired to feel those intuitive hits.
Yeah.
And so, dealing with kids and saying, hey, we're going to do our best, we're doing everything we can, you can even talk about your faith, your spiritual, bulwark. But keeping it that way, I think helps kids grow in a way that they're hopeful, but not in a Pollyanna sort of way. And they know that there's also responsibilities that entail for you to feel more safe than less safe.
Yeah.
And all this more kind of thinking, I think, is more nurturing overall in the long run as well as in the short run. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that's something that's close to my heart.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to tell people how to parent. That's not my job. But that's your responsibility and your business. But I would encourage you to allow a safe space for everyone to say how they feel and to not shut people down, especially children. Don't tell them to not feel sad or to not feel bad. Ask them how they feel. There's nothing wrong with all of you just pulling out a piece of paper, sitting down around the table, and you all writing out your feeling words.
Right, in silence.
Yeah, you don't even have to share them, but just that sense of cohesiveness, is another possible way that you can come together. Or maybe you can shuffle the papers and everybody gets to read somebody else's, whatever works for you. But please, 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 if you can avoid shutting people down about how they feel. More than ever, we have to be able to express how we feel. And most of us are in a state of not feeling safe. So that usually comes out as a state of fear, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I believe that, when the heart hurts, that's also where the antidote is. And it takes a little bit of discipline and training to turn around and face that in that way. but that is the most efficient, productive way to deal with it, to just feel those emotions, to walk towards that. And I've never been let down every time that I have, but it is scary. It is, and it's not what we're taught. So, and that's why we're here this morning. I want people to know and feel encouraged to, your feelings, to honor your feelings, to honor yourself,
Right.
so that we can learn how to honor others as well in the
Right.
same way.
Right. Yeah, and it takes courage to come from the heart, because a lot of us are not encouraged to talk about our feelings. Now, I personally, I come from New Zealand, and I am of the generation where we were taught, don't speak until you're spoken to, suck it up, go to your room if you're going to cry, all of those things. I mean, we were shut down. We were never, ever, ever encouraged to express our feelings. And oh my goodness, for the males of that generation, I believe it was even harder. It was that whole thing, men do not cry. I mean, I believe if it's possible, they possibly had a harder time. But we have to move away from that. And it takes great courage to stand up and say, well, I don't know, but this is how I feel, and this is what we can do. It takes a lot of courage to do that, because we don't have the answers. We really don't. There's no, tomorrow hasn't happened yet. We don't, unless you can time travel, we don't have the answers.
No, but I think courage is needed, and I don't think it can be really avoided. And I think there's more than ever a contrast in front of us, either work hard for the courage, or you're going to end up paying big in the fear. So either one is going to cost you, and we all have to decide, where to plug in, because
yes,
the flow of life is very intense right now. And things can quickly change for any of us.
Yes.
These days and ages. And so, I think wanting to people have more access and more support in other facets of being able to ground and feel the correct intuitive, feelings coming through them that are supportive for them, but also for those around them.
Right. And I think a lot of the time people are so scared of failing. Well, what if I do? What if I do open up and become vulnerable? Because anytime we step out of our comfort circle, we become vulnerable, right? There's no two ways about it. And that, of course, takes courage. And it's like, we take these shaky steps. It's like, oh my God, that was terrible. I blew that, right? I'm just an absolute mess. I gave the wrong message. So what? Just get up and do it again. Just, you can't be in the place anymore where you don't give yourself grace and space and compassion. It's got to start with the self. No matter who you're responsible for, how many people you're responsible for, it's got to come from you first. Mm-hmm. You've got to be okay with who you are. I make mistakes every day. I have foot and mouth disease. I'm pretty sure of it. I make mistakes. I own up to them. It's not pretty, but you know what? We do. We're humans. And if we really think that we're so buttoned up, and that's why, that whole myth of be strong for others is so difficult for others to navigate, because we can't possibly be everything to every person. We can't possibly have all of the answers. So just know that you're going to make mistakes. Know that you might look foolish. Know that you might stumble for your words. Know that you might not have all of the answers, but do the best you can. Now more than ever, we have to hold compassion for ourselves and for others. We're not going to get it right. It's not perfect.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Anne, how can people know more about you and your services?
Well, I'm pretty old-fashioned. The best way to get in touch with me, pick up the phone and call me, 360-721-3433. And then if you want to go directly to my site, it is going to be healinglifeandgrief.me. So healing, HEALING, life and A-N-D, grief, Grief, .as.me, M-E.
And we'll put this in the description for the video as well.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you so much for, having this discussion with me on a very important and, very close to my heart topic. And it's a wonderful place to just go out and live life, right? It's just a good way to just ground yourself, and then, a good place to come from, no matter what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. If it comes from the heart, it's rarely wrong. we might question it, but it's the heart speaks louder than practically anything else that we do. One way or the other, it'll get its message across.
Yeah, and we need that for ourselves first.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Anne. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me, Ricardo. It's been a pleasure.
And I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
We'll talk again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.